Hi Adam, hi Brian. This is a story for you guys. It's called Tony's Bread, an old tale of Italy from Tomie de Paola's big book of favorite legends. So let's get started. Once a long time ago, in a small village outside the grand city of Milano, there lived a baker named Antonio, but everyone called him Tony. Tony made bread, and only bread, in his bakery. It was good and simple, and the villagers loved it, but Tony had a dream. One day he would have a bakery of his own in Milano and become the most famous baker of all of northern Italy. There's Tony baking his bread. Now Tony lived with his only daughter, Serafina. He was a widower, and he had raised Serafina from the time she was una piccola bambina, a little girl, and how he spoiled her. Antonio treated Serafina like una principessa, a princess, said Zia Clotilda. The finest clothes, the finest jewelry, anything her heart desires, said Zia Caterina. She never has to lift a finger. All she does is sit looking out the window eating dolce, sweet, said Zia Clorinda. Now that she is old enough to marry, Tony thinks that no man is good enough for his Serafina, the three sisters whispered to each other. There's the three sisters gossiping. That was true. Tony did think that no man was worthy of his darling daughter. He would not even talk to the young men in the village who wanted to court Serafina. So poor Serafina would sit at the window behind the curtains eating her dolce and crying. One day Angelo, a wealthy businessman from Milano, was passing through the village. As he went by Tony's house, the wind blew the curtains away from the window, and there sat Serafina. Angelo and Serafina looked into each other's eyes, and it was love at first sight for both of them. There they are. The three sisters were standing nearby. "Dear ladies," Angelo asked them, "who is that lovely creature sitting at that window? Che bella donna, what a beautiful woman. Is she married or spoken for?" There's Angelino talking to the sisters. "Ah, young signore," said Zia Clotilda. "That is Serafina, the daughter of Tony the baker." "No, she's not married, and she's not likely to be for a long time," said Zia Caterina. "No one is good enough for Tony's little Serafina," Zia Clorinda explained. "Well, we'll see about that," said Angelo. "Now, aunties, tell me all you can about her." The young nobleman and the three sisters sat and talked and talked and talked, and before long Angelo knew all about Serafina and Tony the baker. And he knew all about Tony's dream of becoming the most famous baker in all of northern Italy. "Grazie, aunties, thank you," said Angelino. "I think I have a plan that will give Tony his dream, and give me the wife of my dreams, but I will need your help. This is what I want from you." The next day a letter arrived at the bakery for Tony. "Dear Signore Baker, I am Angelo, the nobleman from Milano. I was passing through your village and was lucky enough to taste your fine bread. Would you be so kind as to meet me in front of the church after Mass on Sunday so that we may talk? I have a proposal to make for you. Angelo de Milano." And a secret letter arrived at Tony's house for Serafina. "Dear bella Serafina, I saw you at your window and I love you. Here is a ring as a symbol of my adoration. It will not be long before we are husband and wife. Angelo, your true love." And Zia Clotilda, Zia Caterina, and Zia Clorinda did their part. "Oh, Tony, did you see that rich young man from Milano?" Zia Clotilda asked. "He wanted to know all about you. It seems he just loved your bread," said Zia Caterina. "Nothing like it in all Milano," he said, Zia Clorinda told Tony. "Why, I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted to meet you," the way he went on. "Well, dear ladies, funny you should say that, because he does want to meet me. After Mass, on Sunday," said Tony. "His name is Angelo de Milano." "Imagine that!" the three women exclaimed. "Che bella fortuna! What good luck for you!" "And for Serafina," they whispered to each other. "And so, Signor Antonio, I would be most pleased if you and your lovely daughter would come to Milano as my guests," Angelo said. Whoops, I think I skipped a page. Hold on. Nope, I guess not. "I would be most pleased if you and your lovely daughter would come to Milano as my guests," Angelo said. And if you like our city, I would be proud to set you up in a fine bakery of your own near Piazza del Duomo, the cathedral square. Your fame would be assured, Signor Antonio. I will see to that." Tony couldn't believe his ears. His dream was about to become true. "Why, thank you, Signore Angelo, but please call me Tony. All my friends do." "Also, Signor Tony," Angelo continued, "the advantages for your beautiful daughter would be great. I admit I would not find it unpleasant for Serafina to sit beside me at my guest table as my wife, the daughter of Tony, the most famous baker in Milano." That did it. Tony agreed, and off he and Serafina went with Angelo. Together they walked all the small streets around the cathedral square and visited all the bakeries and pastry shops. They tasted torta, cake, and biscotti, cookies, and panne bread. And Tony was depressed. The bread alone was like nothing Tony had ever tasted. Bread made out of the finest, whitest flour, bread shaped like pinwheels, bread with seeds of all sorts scattered over the top. "It is no use, Signor Angelo," said a very sad Tony. "I can never compare with all these fine bakeries and pastry shops. All I can make is bread, and very simple bread at that. I would be the laughing-stock of Milano. It is better if Serafina and I just go home." "No, never!" Angelo shouted. "Oh, Papa, no!" Serafina cried. Not only was she in love with Angelo, but she was looking forward to living in that grand house with all those good things to eat. She was a little chubby, huh? "If only you could make bread that tasted so good as and sweet as this candied fruit and these raisins," Serafina said. "Or," Angelo said, getting another idea, "as rich and sweet as this cup of punch made from milk and eggs and honey." "Milk, eggs, honey," Tony said, thinking out loud. "Candied fruit," Serafina added. "Raisins," Angelo chimed in. "That's it," all three shouted. "I shall make the richest, lightest, most wonderful bread anyone has ever tasted out of the whitest flour, the biggest eggs, the creamiest milk, the sweetest candied fruit, and the plumpest raisins," Tony shouted. "Oh, Papa!" Serafina cried, kissing her father. Servants, Angelo called, and he sent them off to buy all the fine ingredients that Tony would need. The next morning, Tony, Serafina, and all the supplies headed back to the little village, and Tony began to work. Day after day, he experimented until he had mixed the lightest, richest dough with as many raisins and as much candied fruit as he could put into it. Now he was ready to bake. He sent word to Angelo in Milano that he should come to the bakery the next afternoon. Then he set out the dough in large bowls and went to bed. As Tony slept, the dough began to rise and rise and rise. The next morning he filled every pan in his shop. One piece of dough was left over, so he threw it in a flour pot, and he baked that too. When Angelo arrived, the bread was just coming out of the oven, and everyone held their breath and waited until Tony cut a slice of his new bread. Angelo tasted it, Serafina tasted it, Tony tasted it, Zia Clotilda, Zia Caterina, and Zia Clarina all tasted it. "That's it!" they shouted. "I'll take these loaves back to Milano to see what my friends say," Angelo said, and off he went. In just a few days, a letter and a large cart filled with ingredients arrived in the village. "Dear Tony, here are more supplies. Make as much bread as you can and send it to me. Then when I send for you, I promise you will enter Milano with flags flying, and Serafina will be mine, your future son-in-law, Angelo. P.S. Please bake all the loaves in flower pots. My friends like the shape of that loaf the best." Can you imagine shaping bread in flower pots? So, just before Christmas, Angelo sent for Tony and Serafina, and sure enough, when their coach entered Milano, crowds were chanting and cheering, and flags were flying. "Bienvenuto, Tonio!" "Welcome, Tony!" the crowds cheered. "Bienvenuto!" The bishop and the mayor were there to greet Tony and Serafina, and the mayor said, "Milano is so happy to have you here, so we may always have enough of your wonderful bread." The next day, when the bakery shop door was opened, the bishop's guards were called in to keep order. All of Milano was there except for Serafina and Angelo, who were being married quietly in a little chapel in the cathedral. All during the wedding, they could hear the crowds cheering, calling for pan di Tonio, Tony's bread, and to this day, panettone of Milano is eaten and enjoyed, especially at Christmas.